Hey guys, Matt Goodwin here from the Matt Goodwin Substack. I'm going to show you Britain's immigration crisis in 10 charts. This is going to basically show you in detail what's happening to the country, why I think it's important, why I think it's going to change our politics and society in profound ways. As always, you can get this information and data from my Substack at mattgoodwin.org. We've got 35,000 people with us. It would be great to have you with us too. Okay, chart number one. I've written a lot about the ongoing failures of mass migration, what it's doing to our country, but actually if you want to look at what's really happening, then take a look at this chart. Since 2010, some 10 million people have moved into the UK, about 6.5 million have left, meaning that net migration over the last decade or so has added nearly 4 million people to the population. That's equivalent to the populations of Edinburgh, Leeds, Sheffield, Nottingham, Stoke, Bristol and Cardiff combined. It's more than the entire population of Wales. It's a good way to representing somewhere around 3 cities the size of Birmingham. Just under 7 million people in England and Wales arrived between 2001 and 2021, which is nearly 1,000 people extra every day. Chart 2, looking at annual net migration from EU and non-EU countries. So what you can see here is just how the source of migration into the UK has completely changed. The new system introduced by Boris Johnson began in 2021, and this introduced much stricter controls for people coming from inside the European Union, but it significantly loosened controls for people coming from outside of the European Union, from the rest of the world. And this was how really Boris Johnson liberalised the immigration system. Contrary to what he promised, that we'd get high skill, lower migration, actually we got something very different. Now in the previous decade, about twice as many people came from the European Union as the number who came from the rest of the world. But in 2021 and 2022, in the latest data, only 290,000 people came to the UK from the European Union, but 1.64 million people came from the rest of the world. In 2022, the Office for National Statistics predicted that if this carries on, then the UK population will hit around 70 million people by the year 2036. It now predicts that this will actually happen a decade earlier, in about 2026. So mass migration is completely transforming our population. Chart 3. The visas issued by nationality between 2021 and 2023. Now, if you want a sense of just how much our immigration story here in Britain is changing, then look at where those visas are going. Since the new immigration system came fully into effect in 2021, visas issued to migrants from the European Union have made up just 4% of the total. In other words, both the overall numbers and the composition of the current wave of migration are very different from what it was in the 2000s and the 2010s. Britain is welcoming in much more distinctive forms of migration, which have also consistently been shown to be more of an economic cost than benefit. Many of those visas going to people from India, China, Nigeria, Ukraine, Pakistan, Hong Kong, Bangladesh, Zimbabwe, and also beyond in the rest of the world. Chart 4. GDP per capita and net migration, 10-year moving averages. Now what this chart is showing you is how those rates of net migration have unfolded alongside our GDP per capita, a good measure of how productive and how dynamic our economy is. Now the argument that we're often given is that mass migration is driving economic growth. However, as you can see, the picture is not exactly supporting that narrative. The very high levels of migration have coincided with a dramatic slowdown in growth in GDP per head, as even the Migration Advisory Committee notes, which is an independent body, it advises government. It says immigration may have historically dampened incentives to adopt machinery to be dynamic and innovative. For example, if you look at the number of automated car washes in the UK, they more than halved from 9,000 in the year 2000 to just around 4,000 by 2015. In other words, mass migration being used, often illegal migration being used to stop us from innovating and using more automation. Meanwhile, the number of hand washing car cleaning sites has expanded to nearly 20,000 as they become much more reliant upon illegal and legal migration. The key point that I'm trying to make here is that the policy of mass migration has not really driven any visible improvement in GDP per head. It's coincided with low growth, with stagnant productivity, with static inequalities. It's simply not really giving us that big dynamic economy that we were told it was going to give us. Chart 5. Net migration of non-EU nationals by reason, 2018 to 2023. Is Britain attracting the best of the best? This was what Boris Johnson promised, of course. But actually, if you look at the chart, only 15% of the 2 million people who migrated into the UK over the last 5 years or so came on high-skilled work visas. The rest were the relatives of workers, were students, were the relatives of students. They came through family reunification programs. They came through humanitarian programs for people in Hong Kong or Ukraine. They were asylum seekers, or in some cases they were one of the more than 120,000 illegal migrants. So is Britain attracting the best of the best? Well, clearly not. A large number of people who have moved into the UK over recent years have done so for reasons other than work, and so were not subject to the earnings requirements of those work visa routes. In fact, the most startling statistic for me is out of that number of 2 million non-EU nationals over the last 5 years, only 15%, 1/5, came principally to work. Even ignoring those on the asylum and humanitarian routes, many others have come without facing salary thresholds because they've come as international students, or they've come as the relatives of students or workers. And so basically we've got lots of people working in the gig economy, in low-wage jobs, low-skilled jobs, not really driving the economy forward in any meaningful sense. Chart 6. The proportion of sponsored skilled worker visas issued between 2022 and 2023 by ranked median salary of occupation. What's this showing you? Well, it shows you that even of those on skilled worker visas, supposedly the best of the best, actually more than 2/3 of them, 68%, came in to take jobs where the median salary was less than the median earnings of full-time workers in the UK. And 72% of those who came in on skilled worker visas came in to work in jobs where the median salary was less than the mean earnings of full-time workers. This is pretty bonkers. It's quite astonishing. Skilled workers should be the most economically beneficial component of migration, but actually even many of those people who are coming in are tending to end up in lower wage jobs. This is not what Boris Johnson and the Conservatives said they were going to do. We've got lots of people coming in who are simply working on lower salary, lower skilled jobs. Chart 7. Do Brits think that immigration has been too high or too low in the last 10 years? Well, as you can see, consistently, large majorities of Brits, typically upwards of 60-65%, say immigration has been too high. There is widespread consensus in the country for slashing immigration. The proportion of voters who say that immigration is too high has been gradually rising over the last 2 years. Today, in the latest polling, I'm speaking to you in May 2024, 64% of voters think that immigration has been too high in the last 10 years. That's more than 10 times as many who say it's been too low. More than half of Londoners think it's been too high, as do around half of the Liberal Democrat voters and nearly half of all Remain voters. Even among 18 to 24-year-olds, who were often told are the most liberal, the most pro-immigration, 44% think it's been too high versus 5% who think it's been too low. Chart 8, the population of England and Wales. This is showing you the share of the population that was born outside of the UK and the share of the population that now belongs to an ethnic minority group. Between 1981 and 2001, the share of the population of England and Wales that was born outside of the UK has increased from 6.6% to almost 9%, but by 2021 it had increased to almost 17%. That means that the share of foreign born in the UK is now even higher than it is in the United States of America, which is pretty remarkable And ethnicity data tells a very similar story. Between 2001 and 2021, the proportion of people in the population who do not identify as white British has more than doubled to reach nearly 26%. All of this is really reflecting those longer term demographic trends as Britain is moving and is being pushed into this era of what we might call super diversity, with mass migration, much of it from outside of the UK, much of it causing considerable angst among the British population. Chart 9, the change in population and number of dwellings in England, the 5-year moving average. Now what this is showing you is just how net migration is really dramatically worsening the housing crisis, which I've written about on Substack too. To cope with population growth and net migration, we need to expand our housing stock in the UK by about 3.5 million homes, 2.25 million to meet underlying demand pressures, and another 1.2 million just to cope with our current rates of net migration. In fact, we've only increased the number of homes by about 2 million, which is leaving a deficit of around 1.3 million homes, with net migration accounting for 90% of that deficit. So what you're seeing is net migration basically driving up rents, driving up house prices, meaning that we have to build many, many more homes, not only to deal with the existing demand within the British population, but also we now need to build many, many more homes to deal with the additional demand coming as a result of mass migration. And the final slide, slide 10, is the annual share of new social housing going to non-UK nationals in England. And as you can see, that number has been gradually increasing. The annual proportion of new social lets to non-UK nationals in England has just reached a record 10.4% in 2022 and 23. So migrants from outside of Europe accounted for more than 3/5 of the non-UK national lets, which is up from half in 2019 and 2020. So young people in particular are losing out as a consequence of this process. We've created a system where often skilled graduate workers are struggling to afford a room in a shared house in zones 3 or 4, while unskilled migrants are living in subsidised housing in zones 1 and 2. It is not obvious, as others have pointed out, that this is a sensible use of resources. It's leaving many people, especially British families and British young people, with a clear sense and a frustrating sense that they are being pushed to the margins in the housing sector by this broken experiment with mass migration. So those are 10 charts that show you just how much mass migration is changing the country today. Join us at mattgoodwin.org, join us at the Substack. We've got loads of data. I talk through it in detail. This is just a primer. I hope to see you there. Hopefully you can join us at mattgoodwin.org. Thank you.